All right, welcome to another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. My name is David Margolin. Today we're doing it on Wednesday. The forecasts were submitted yesterday, on Tuesday. Um, and in terms of today's agenda, we'll start off with attribution, and then we'll go into our forecast. So, without further ado, let's talk about the attribution. I only laugh because, as some of you probably have already done too, I've kind of looked back, and it was a tough one. And if anyone can't see my screen, please let me know. And again, let's keep this pretty informal today. So just please just jump in. Let's have some fun with it. So all right. So the last verifying forecast was from October 20th, made October 20th up here, and the verification, the target window was November 4th, November 8th, so just a couple days ago. And I had to double check this. I thought it was an error at first. The verification in HDDs was 36. Looks like someone's trying to join. All right. Was 36 HDDs. And you can see our range of forecasts were from about 82 with the CFS. So I guess that run of good luck with the CFS is over. 82 with the CFS. And some of our persistence forecasts by hook or crook were in the 50s. The lowest human forecast was Matt Lanza at 65. So just an incredible thing. Let me just show you what it looked like before we kind of dive into it. I definitely want to see what folks think in terms of um, the mechanism here. There's the verification. So we'll start off with the just upper levels. This is the 500 millibar height anomalies, November 4th, November 8th. So big honking ridge across basically north, United States, but really centered up there across Michigan, Midwest, but really just sprawling across almost the entire United States, with the exception of across West Coast. And then you could see a couple other areas of pretty anomalous ridging over East Pac, over kind of the North Atlantic or northern kind of Europe, across Central and Eastern Europe area. Kind of a positive NAO look there too. And then let's just look at what this looked like in temperatures. We'll zoom into the United States a little bit, because obviously this is impressive. Good, nice weather though to get outside a little bit. Yeah, there's your there's your departure from normal map. And then if you want to see where it was in terms of rankings, I think it was number 2. I cheated earlier. Yeah. Um, again, if you haven't seen this, MaxFire's got a nice little tool here where you can quickly see where the rankings are and all that kind of good stuff. So again, there's our number, the 36, about 36 HDs. There's the 10 and 30 years, comparison, and then down here's your table, and it already ranks it lowest to highest. And I think you can change that if you want. But so the lowest, actually, there was one lower back in 1975, was a little bit lower, but this year came in as the second lowest there in our rankings. So let's see. Here, let's just, before I open it up, although anyone can jump in. Let's just look. I already, as you guys know, I'll just remind you. You can click on now the maps. So this is real, nice that we can kind of go back and say, hey, what was the EC, 500 millibar pattern at the time, or the 2-meter temperature pattern? Just as a reminder, you've got those buttons up here. I've already clicked on them just so that we had them open. So yeah, let's just start with the 2-meter temperature. This is the CFS 2-meter temperature. Yeah, so as was discussed earlier at the start of this, not a winning forecast from the CFS, to say the least, right? I mean, it wasn't just a case of, well, it missed, it kind of had the right pattern, but it just wasn't strong enough with the anomalies. No, we can't even say that at this point. The we saw on the map here that the eastern central parts of the country had the strongest warm anomalies, and it was maybe the west coast where you actually saw a little bit of blows. So wasn't even close in terms of pattern. I mean, it wasn't just an intensity issue; it was the whole caboodle. Here's the EC. Definitely a little bit better. I mean, I'm speaking subjectively here or qualitatively, but um, it seemed to capture maybe a little bit more of that pattern configuration better. Again, I'm just looking at this visually. I don't have any like spatial correlation numbers, but it just looks a little bit better. It didn't have as significant of a break in the middle. That being said, obviously it wasn't even close in terms of anomalies, and you could have argued, so I know some meteorologists like to kind of do the rule of thumb that find the strongest anomalies on the map and use that as your anchor. Well, if you had done that, then you would have said, well, the strongest anomalies on the map are actually toward the west, right? A little bit of stronger anomalies in California out there and such. And if you had done that, and kind of extrapolated that, where am I? Oh, sorry. That would have been a terrible mistake, right? You would have actually gone, warmer across the West Coast, maybe a little bit cooler in the middle. So that sort of rule of thumb that I don't know I've heard about or maybe even used in the past certainly wouldn't have helped you with this map. And then just quickly looking at the upper levels, there's the
Hey,
EC.
Dave.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. Can you elaborate on why you said the ECMWF was? I know they were both bad, but why that one was better?
Why I think the EC was better. I
Yeah.
guess again, just qualitatively, it didn't have as much of this kind of ridge trough kind of configuration. CFS more discernibly, yeah, just looking at this, had some more blues, up the gut or toward the Mississippi, whereas the EC, kind of showed that linkage, the warmth spreading across the central and east.
Okay.
Um, that's all. That's all I was, yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. And then from a 500 pattern, going kind of fast there. There's the EC 500, and I'll go back just so we can see the verification here in a second too. So we can, it'd be nice maybe one day to try to have all three of these lined up. But there's the EC, right? All right. There's our buddy the CFS. Do that. Let me go back and forth a couple times. Just curious. Yeah, some of these signals are pretty close. Like southern Greenland looks pretty close. I mean, one's stronger than the other. They both have the signal across eastern Canada, arguably. Obviously, the western United States is different, and then out across the Pacific is a little bit different. All right, now let's go back to the verification. I just want to see that again. What was that over here? All right, let's just switch back real quick. We'll do the global view, 500, right? Let's see what that looked like again. All right. I know it's off center a little bit too, but yeah. So, and looking at North America, in particular, like the big, obviously big trough or below normal height anomalies across northern Canada. Obviously, the big above normal anomalies, southern Canada and eastern United States. Let's go back and look at the maps. CFS, yeah, definitely missed a lot of the above normal. Well, let me just open it up because now I'm just I know a few people jumped on here. Dave D'Arcangelo, Joe. When you look back at this forecast, and Lynn, um, are there indicators here? I mean, the CFS missed this forecast by 2 standard deviations or more. I guess from two perspectives. When you think back on October 20th, were there telltale signs then that hey, this could bust in a big way in a warmer direction? And if so, what were they? And two, regardless of what you were thinking on October 20th, looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, do you look back now and say, hey, there's some lessons learned where you might be able to see something like that, better resolve it the next time it happens? Opening it up. Who'd like to
I'll
go?
I'll just say that based on my particular formula, that I did not see any that extreme of a risk. I mean, 36 is it's pretty low. That's probably top three if I had to guess. Um, and even the CPC, I vaguely remember their forecast, and they had some, I think, below normals, very close to where the heart of the above normals were. Um, for what that's worth, so I don't think they saw too much risk to that side either. Um, so like I said, from my formula perspective, I didn't see um, that kind of a verification happening at all.
And Michael, I was just thinking, did we produce the maps? This might have
No,
been
I checked.
okay.
Either,
This
or if we did, it doesn't work for this particular week. But I don't think we did. So
okay. Let me check mine too real quick. Okay. Oh, or was I just testing it, or was I just going flat
mine
normal?
said 404 not found.
Okay, it might have been the next week. It might have been the next week when we started this officially. Looks like Zach put in something. Anyway, okay. Um, any no thanks. So Michael, your sort of takeaway is, it's I know it's like, especially when you have your stakeholders yelling in your face and saying, what the hell happened, and it's always sucks to be like, I don't know, like that's the worst answer to give, right? It feels like the worst answer to give, but you're kind of, is that kind of where you're at right now, where it's still not obvious to you? It certainly wasn't obvious at the time, and as to, to expect something like this, a 36.
Yeah, I mean, based on, I'd have to remember exactly what the teleconnections looked like at that time. Um, and I I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't remember what the teleconnections looked like. I just have what I wrote, which I think it says they were either trending towards neutral or slightly positive for the NAO and AO. So maybe I could, if I had to give an attribution, the NAO and AO look like they're significantly more positive than they were predicted to be.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's my only the only explanation I can give, which I don't think is a particularly bad one.
Well, that's actually that's a good starting point. That's a really good starting point. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm, not to sit here and say that this is it and this explains everything, but it is a data point. There's no question here, right, that the GFS ensemble, in the 14-day forecast, including our period of verification here in general, uh, did underestimated how positive the AO was, and it seems like that could be a part of the puzzle. Now, there's a second question here, which is, even if we think that the AO was the main driver of a much warmer pattern, why? Why the models, not under resolve the positive nature of the AO, and more importantly, will that, if you want to call it bias, is that a bias that's going to continue, or just, is it just part of natural variability? Any thoughts? I know that's not an easy question, but any thoughts on that, Michael?
Um, the only thing I would add to that is usually, I've noticed that the AO, at least this past, let me see, so since like late winter, early spring-ish, the AO is usually verified on the upper end of guidance, and you can kind of see it there back in September and now in October through about now. It's been on the upper end, and rarely has it gotten, other than a few like big dips, has it been on the lower end. So there might be something to look into there where you can kind of predict uh, future bias, I guess, based on past performance. But uh, that would be kind of hard to glean out as to when it's gonna do something like that.
Yeah, and I forgot that, they do quantify it here. So you can, mean is effectively bias here, right? Um, so there certainly, in this 14-day forecast, has been a bias of, minus zero point 0.4, you could see how that bias, as you would expect, it kind of shrinks as you get into the shorter range. So that's interesting. So anyone else have any thoughts on this lovely forecast?
I've got some. Um, I don't really have a full explanation for this, but my gut feeling is that likely the reason for it or has to be something that everybody's not already looking at. Like if the answer was lying in the teleconnections, somebody probably would have seen it coming, maybe.
Yeah.
So maybe it's got to be somewhere we're not looking. That's a source of predictability on this time scale. I don't know what's going on in the Northern Hemisphere with regards to sea ice cover and thickness, and if there are anything going on at 3 weeks ago. I just don't know. I haven't been following, but that might be one possibility.
So certainly there were no human forecasters that had the, the strength of the warmth. But Matt Lanza did have a decent human forecast. He's down there. It's still almost double the verification, but it's definitely quite warm. And he mentions, he's not here, so he can't say what he was thinking about, but he does say, MJO and teleconnections were some of the key things he was looking at. So maybe, maybe the full amplitude wasn't there, but something in one of these teleconnections, I guess, maybe not the AO specifically, because that didn't seem to be properly forecast, but maybe some of these other things demonstrated a little bit of predictability anyway.
That's a good point, Dr. Decker. It's worth probably, let me see if I can, I don't know if you guys can see his strategy. I'm just trying to, let me see if I can paraphrase it. Expecting transient positive P&A ridge to be in the Midwest East, start of the period, rising heights in the Pac Northwest or just offshore, which is what happened, I think, may lead to a transient cool push in this period focused on Rockies plains, but unsure if it will get east of Chicago. The cool will get east of Chicago. If it does, low to mid 70 HDDs is reasonable. If it doesn't, upper 50s to low 60s HDDs. Fairly widespread and potential outcomes, focusing primarily on trying to predict the state of PNA, AO, GWO, MJO. Wildcard risk is if New England stays cool. Should still verify, but spatially be different. Yeah. And then we had on the other end, we had and I'm just trying to give a range here. We obviously had some folks thinking a little bit colder, and I remember I think I even talked to Matt Rogers about this a little bit, thinking that the MGO might move into cooler phase. I was on sort of a little bit cooler end. I was thinking that the MGO at the time, because what did we say? This was made on the 20th or so. I was thinking that, the MGO might move into cooler phases. And so I think I was thinking actually even some cooler risk, more than warmer risk at the time. Like the numerical model guidance might underestimate it. But of course, you can see, although it did move into these cooler phases, it also weakened dramatically. And if you remember, I'm putting a lot of sort of qualitative pieces together, but that's what we do. We kind of play detective here a little bit. If you remember let's see if I have it open. Where's this guy? It's interesting, right? When you look at this time of year, note how there's a really stark difference in, the kind of HDD response. Now I know I'm doing a couple different things here, but I think what this kind of tells me is, one of the things I think it tells me is, you have higher amplitude phase 7 and 8 in general is going to have a bigger impact than a weaker phase 7 and 8, and that there's a pretty dramatic difference. So, we know that even though we did eventually get into phases 7 and 8, the signal weakened dramatically. So it could be something there. Anyone else have thoughts on this forecast?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we looked at, Dave, was that we utilized the Bureau of Meteorology's MJO website, and it showed that the MJO was still going to be either in or very close to the circle of death, low amplitude. And with that in mind, that's why we didn't really take the MJO into consideration. Our method, Dr. Lupo and I, our method of utilizing the Bering Sea rule, along with the JMA and our extended analogs, showed that the ridging would be in earnest, if you will, over the east with a west coast trough. And we just missed out on the amplitude, obviously, when we went with the score of 70. But hold on real quick. I'm pretty sure my my link should have that MJO forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology. Let me look. Yes, it does. Oh, but it's the old one because they stopped that. Let me get it for you real quick.
Joe, would you like to share your screen? I can.
Oh, yeah. I can do that.
Let me do that.
Hold on. Don't laugh at all of my tabs.
Huh. Oh, you might have me beat. Wow.
So this is the Bureau of Meteorology's new website when it comes to multiple. You can track the Kelvin wave, the equatorial Rossby wave, and the MRG wave on this website. And the first link that's down below in our forecast was their old research link. So that in late September, that went void. And I emailed the Bureau of Meteorology contact on that original link, and he was on vacation, and it wasn't until later that he sent me this that it got updated. So this is the OLR, ongoing outgoing long wave radiation look, and I love it personally. And so for the longest time, as I was saying, it was showing low amplitude or going into the circle of death. And so that's what we were basing ours on highly. We also utilized the sub-X a little bit, and the SOI daily change. So where am I here? I got it. And this is my my BSR.
Hey, Joe, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, since you scanned over the SOI real quick. What do you think? Do you think that the La Nina pattern is influencing the forecast here in November? Is this kind of what you would expect associated with the La Nina base rate, or do you think that this super warm pattern we're in is due to more other subseasonal or whatever?
Well, as I've always talked to Dr. Lupo about how one of my favorite catchphrases is, quote, "It's a marriage of sorts." So even though one pattern can overwhelm the other, you've got to look at literally everything that's there. I do believe that our standard La Nina with a southeast ridge coming into winter, that is, I'll be up front. I'm not too familiar with how a La Nina looks. Let me look here real quick. I know ESRL has correlation coefficients with excuse me. So if you come here for Southern Oscillation Index, let's look at November. create, let's bring that down to USA. Okay, so I mean, as you can see, you know, the seasonal correlation with the SOI, I mean, really isn't all of that robust for November. What we do is we take the fluctuations, you know, to repeat what I've said in the past, we take the fluctuations of the daily change, whether it be a 1-day change of 10 points or a 3-day change of 20 points. And Dr. Lupo and I created a composite for INSO, INSO, season, and I mean, season, and then separate composites for 20-point changes in 3 days and 10-point changes in 1 day, both for rises and drops. And that's how we utilize that aspect. We don't necessarily do this composites in general, if you will. We focus on the change rate, and we actually utilized it for the Climate Prediction Center Diagnostic Workshop presentation that we did in October for severe weather. So going back to your question, I mean, it's a little bit deeper than just a simple correlation, you know, based on the month. Sorry, I think I got into a tangent. But another thing that we do too is, you know, we look at the NAEFS and we look at the trend of the NAEFS since it's literally right before our 16 to 20 day period. And, you know, we watch the trend if it's getting warmer or cooler and along those lines too. And then lastly, we take I've expanded your spreadsheet, and I broke it down even farther, and I took like the average of the 10 and 30 year to come up with a decent number, because so many times, you know, like for instance, in the past couple forecasts that we've done, the 10 years been skewed because of those couple really cold periods. Like in 14 when Nuri just shot a rubber band into the atmosphere and everything went cold during that November. So, you know, we look at that also. I mean, there's just so many things that we look at. It's almost ridiculous.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, before we switch gears, anyone else? Dave Darkangelo, I think you jumped on here. You have any thoughts in terms of this forecast from a market perspective?
Hey, Dave.
Hey.
So there's two things that stick out. I guess it's really kind of bundled into one, is that when we were making this forecast on the 20th, we were seeing a fairly strong west-moving typhoon in the South China Sea. We had another typhoon that was just south of central Japan that was kind of trapped underneath a bit of a ridge in the east part of Asia. So it wasn't really like a classical recurve. And then within a day or so following this, there was another typhoon that was going to track west across the Philippines and into the South China Sea. So we clearly had a pattern that in the West Pac that was not favorable for cold. Not arguing that it was super favorable for this warm, but I think that some of the higher frequency noise out of the West Pac was signaling that this was at least a possibility. I think this is just another example. We've probably mentioned this a few times already. Is that, you know, the risk in the extended is always far wider than we give it credit for, right? The market for weather, the market for modeling, the market for indices, or whatever you want to look at, is always undercounting how much the tails of the distribution are valid. So while the 36 number of verification looks really, really pretty shocking, and it is in terms of historical context, right? It's, you know, it's number 2 on your list, right? Our sample size is still really small, so to take that into account. I tried to play that with a bit of a wider standard dev this week or spread, and I wasn't nearly wide enough. So again, we're always too under dispersed with these types of events. You know, I feel like anything beyond kind of about the week, maybe 7 or 8 day time spread is always under dispersed, right? The risk for the tails is much higher than we give it credit for. But the westward moving typhoons were a bit of a fingerprint that this pattern had some pretty warm potential. I'm not saying we can quantify how warm, but it was leaning in that direction.
Okay. Yeah, Dave definitely had one of the warmer forecasts here. Looks like only
not by a lot. I actually should note, Dave, I had gone for a really warm forecast the week prior. Something that was really outside the bounds of the distribution, it seemed. And I got burned on that, right? We had kind of I think I made a comment last week with regards to that verification, which was, you know, you move it a couple of days and it gets,
right.
you know, really warm. Not saying those were my exact words, but I'm trying to recall. I had gone for a really warm forecast. And so this is an interesting game that we're playing, is that you're always, you're trying to make a new forecast, but you're always influenced by what has come in the recent past. So, you know, it's hard to have a closer's mentality. You kind of have to forget what happened a week ago and what burned you then, right? There's different inputs now, but nevertheless, did make the same really warm forecast and, you know, compounded my error, so to speak.
Yeah, look at that, Dave. I mean, to your point, all I did was I went back 5 days. Look at this. Just, you know, you can do the shift period 5 days, I think it is. So let's just shift it back 5 days and look at am I doing this right? Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me make sure I got it. The days. Yeah, no, that's it. Here's the 4th through the 8th, and we'll shift it back a full 5 days. And this is the October 30th through November 3rd. Look at that.
Yep, we're always under dispersed on actual weather. We're always under dispersed on how much volatility exists week to week. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, the CFS kind of looked like, I know a couple of us were talking about it. I think up until last week, it was, you know, it had started off the heating season very well. You know, obviously, the week Dave mentioned, the last verification before this one, I think the CFS was, easily number 1. And I think it did pretty well the week before too, which was a little bit on the cooler end. But that's changed. That's for sure. Okay, I guess that's unless anyone else has anything on attribution, I guess we also have to look forward. So let's just pull up the forecast for today. And I just want to finish off though. I think there were a couple interesting things. You know, for those who are just kind of taking notes or thinking about potential projects down the road, a couple ideas that came up. One was, you know, hey, the NAO, you know, it's been verified more positive. Maybe there's something to look into there in terms of the relationship. There was the talk about the MGO and interference and just, you know, the fact that it came in weaker and whatnot. And then also the hurricanes that Dave just mentioned, the fact that we have some westward moving typhoons. So a few different, you know, and even Lynn kind of mentioned that, you know, maybe there's just something that we're not seeing, right? Like that needs to be investigated that we don't quite have our finger on. So I think a few different interesting research topics for, you know, when you have a couple hours and you're looking for something to do. All right, so looking at the current forecast. So this is right, the forecast we made from yesterday. Let's just look at the range real quick. So definitely we had a warmer skew to things because I just sorted it by the forecast mean, and normal, the 30-year normal is actually the warmest I'm sorry, the coldest highest HDD forecast, the coldest forecast at 113. And then we've got looks like some of the warmer forecasts are in the 70s, and persistence, which I guess kind of makes sense because you're persisting in an incredibly warm verification. So persistence would be incredibly warm if that verifies. So and we should have, or at least some of us probably did the forecast maps too. Who would like to open it up and talk about their forecast a little bit?
So I guess I could start since probably referred to the CPC forecast. So I have a lot of warmth, right, in the CPC forecast. I don't know if you have their 3 to 4 week forecast up, or you can pull it up quickly. So yeah, it's warm, except for the California, but there aren't too many HDDs to speak of anyway there. So I am below normal on the HDDs. The probabilities aren't huge, except for the high plains where there aren't a huge population, but definitely given the warmth, and it didn't seem like there was any cold air nearby that might screw up the forecast. The discussion from the CPC noted some decent agreement between the various tools, so I went fairly warm for. I mean, given these probabilities, I mean, I never go too crazy away from the normal, but I did go definitely a decent amount on the warm end.
Dr. Decker, any other? Did you see anything in terms of the CPC? I know sometimes they have they have their technical discussion and whatnot. Any nuggets there in terms of obviously they have a very warm forecast, as you said, but as to why or what's driving this and kind of expected to maintain this warm forecast or pattern?
The two things I remember are the large scale patterns from both CFS and ECMWF seemed fairly consistent, and then sort of also accounting La Nina type conditions, especially over the southeastern half of the map. That would imply warmth as well.
So that's interesting. I mean, so it sounds like that last point you said, I'm just pulling up the maps here, but it sounds like they are starting to bake in the La Nina background state into their forecast process, and that it is, in their interpretation, a warm signal, I guess, for the country, for the eastern half of the country.
Right.
Okay. So it's interesting. I mean, I know Joe pulled up that one chart, but Joe also said, hey, obviously it's like correlation map of 50 years and 1 month and stuff like that. I mean, it's a snapshot, right? It's one data point. That's I think another thing that could be interesting to dive into here. You look at that snapshot that Joe pulled up, and my first impression, if I knew nothing, would be there's no relationship. There's no correlation. There's nothing here between La Nina and November patterns. But maybe the devil's in the details here. Maybe you have to look a little bit more into it. Maybe there's a stronger signal at the surface. Maybe there's a stronger signal in the last 20, 30 years. Maybe there's a different data set that shows a different outcome. But it would be interesting to kind of to understand that a little bit better. Okay. Any questions for Dr. Decker? Any more questions? Michael, would you like to walk us through your forecast process today?
So I forgot to submit a forecast, but I did take a look at some of the stuff, and I can kind of walk through the gist of what it would have been had I actually submitted one. Looking at we already went through the CPC, so that was obviously a very warm signal. Looking at the teleconnections, the AO still leaning towards positive, still looking very positive, even with the spread. NAO almost looks like it wants to go to neutral, but still leaned positive on that as well based on past verifications here. And the PNA still looking negative. So I would lean towards more of the same, probably be just on how I set up my formula, I'd probably be low 100s, like 101 to like 99. I'd have to do the exact math, but that's probably around where I'd be.
Okay. And what about your thoughts? Just is there something here that's likely to maintain this pattern for the foreseeable future? Um, or is this one of those situations that, it never fails, right? It's just human nature. You get in, forecast bus in a certain direction. In this case, it was warm. The forecasts continue to show warmth for the most part. It feels like warmth will never end until, of course, it does. But or is there legs to this? Is there something that you see that says to you, yeah, this is really something that's going to drive it? Or are you just kind of, hey, listen, the guidance is there. I don't have a strong reason to go against the guidance. I mean, in other words, is there some skepticism? Do you feel like
So,
there's a risk that it could go colder?
for this particular forecast, I don't think there's a risk it could go colder. But in terms of whether or not this will be the pattern going forward, I think there's arguments to be made, either or. Because the La Nina base state, if this is the La Nina pattern setting up, um, then that should stay as long as the La Nina stays. And I don't think there's any forecast saying the La Nina is supposed to go away, at least for the next month or so. Um, but I think I remember a couple of weeks ago, some industry guests were saying that, um, early to mid to even possibly the 20th of November, um, it was supposed to be warmer or on the warmer side and then the negative NAO AO regime was supposed to build back in. I don't remember their exact reasoning for that, but I think that's what they were saying. Um, so there's arguments on both sides. I'm leaning towards the warmer side overall, because this just seems to be the way winters go over here. So that would, these days. So that's I'm leaning towards warmer is my final answer.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like your spidey sense doesn't, see some mischief around the corner, at least at this point. It's interesting too. I didn't realize how warm the CFS is. It's warmer than it's warmer than the ESMWF for this period, almost by almost 10 HDE. So for what it's worth, the CFS is buying into this warmer scenario. We'll see how that pans out. All right. Any more questions for Michael? I guess I'll ask you one more. I'm just putting I know we've gotten away from this a little bit, but my industry hat on, Michael. So, I'm trying to be jerkish a little bit. But so we just came out of this, whatever, almost record warm pattern here, or verification from the other day. What's the risk here? You're underestimating things again. Is this going to just blow up again? Are we going to have a number that's going to be like, I don't know, 50 or something like that, why aren't you forecasting more, or are you being conservative here just because that's what we do? How would you address that kind of question?
So, as to I'll address it in, I guess, two parts or ways, however you want to. So first, I'll say that, I stick with my formula through thick and thin. Sometimes it can miss things, sometimes it hits things. But I like its consistency, and I stick with that, and that's why my number doesn't swing wildly from week to week. Um, Even if the verification comes in at 30 or 200 or whatever, um, I stick with my formula with that, and I'm pretty confident in it. The second thing I'll say is it's pretty unlikely to have a record warm verification 2 weeks in a row. Not impossible, but pretty sure I haven't seen one like that in a while. At least not to that magnitude where most people were off by 50, 60 HDDs. So that would be my answer. That it's unlikely that it goes that low again. The pattern doesn't seem to support it going that low again. And I would and as to dropping the number, I don't have I'm confident enough in my formula that I don't think I need to do that at this time. Of course, things change and the formula stops working, then of course I'll have to look into changing the formula. But I think for right now, I think the formula. I'm confident in the formula.
Okay, and I was hoping. I think Dave Darkangelo jumped off. Dave, are you on? No,
Yeah, he
Dave?
jumped off.
Okay. I was going to turn to him just because I thought that. Sorry, I thought that would be a. I wanted to ask him, saying, how do you think your traders would respond to that? So your answer was, hey, I stick with my forecast through thick and thin, and B, it's unlikely to see two kind of near record-breaking warm forecasts in a row. Because I think, well, obviously we can't ask him, but that first answer, it's a tricky one because in some respects, I agree, and I think you're 100% right in the sense that just because you have a forecast that goes right or wrong, necessarily you don't change your formula, right? It's one data point, right? And you could have a great forecast and followed by bad and good and bad. You don't necessarily whipsaw it just based on one data point. It makes total sense. On the other hand, I could also see them saying, well, Michael, then you're telling me you're never gonna catch these anomalous forecasts, right? You're always stuck in the middle. How am I ever gonna know? And I think maybe it's beyond the scope maybe of the forecast contest here, at least how we have it right now. But it's like I don't think you're not necessarily saying that there aren't heightened risk for an extreme event, right? And I think that's how you could communicate that if you were at the desk right now and talk to them and say, hey guys, here's my center line forecast. It's 100 HDDs or whatever. But I also want to communicate that I think there's normally, there's a 5% risk to get HDDs below 60. In this situation, I actually think the risk is closer to 15%, so it's whatever, like, 200% above normal. So they may be able to do something with that, right? They have fancy algorithms and stuff like that. So now all of a sudden they know that there's, a height, two things: qualitatively, a heightened risk of an extreme event, and you've even tried to put a number on it so that they can potentially feed that into their models and use that information. So just an idea, but that might be another way that you could sort of address that kind of question if it comes up.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Cool. All right. We still have a few more minutes. Joe, did you want to talk about today's forecast process?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm going back and forth between muting because of my coughing fits.
Would you like the screen, Joe?
Huh?
Would you like the screen again?
Yeah, hold on real quick.
Sure.
Let me bring up my stuff. So, we utilize extending the CPC 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day analogs as one of our methods. And we're still seeing the warmth coming through. This was made on Monday. And so, it's like a day off or so, but still the premise remains. We're still seeing the warmth come through in that regards. There we go. Again, as I showed earlier, we're still showing a low amplitude, if not circle of death, MJO. So that aspect is still mitigating the factors that screen sharing is paused. That's weird. Okay, there we go. I don't, why does it keep on doing that? Resume share. Oh, that's why. Okay. So I need to change it to this. Okay. All right. Now we're all right. Okay. The take into account that this was the earlier sub-X. We took the sub-X into consideration. Also, the MJO look via Paul Roundy's website. Even though it was a low, through the MJO of BOM, we still looked at this in the sense of it was reflecting what we were thinking, regardless that it was a low amplitude. The JMA came out really warm for their 3rd and 4th week. Let me think. Come back here and SOID. All rise. And we saw an uptick in the SOI daily change, and it shows that the warmth was still holding strong after a brief respite, if you will. And that's the thing that's also going to be a kicker, is timing the cold front that we're seeing coming through at the end of period. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of my extended analogs, but we're showing that a strong possibility of the beginning of December is coming in cold. Here we go. That's December. The BSR was still showing this stout ridge in the period. But again, coming back, we're seeing that possibility of a trough with that northwest flow coming back in the beginning of December. So again, all of our organic and outside of the box methods was showing that the warmth was coming. Granted, we didn't go as strong in our our forecasts regarding how many standard deviations from normal we were. So we went with a 95 because here it is. This is our algorithm, quote, that I was speaking of on taking your spreadsheet into account. We still went below the normal, by 10 points, 10 to 15 points. So, we still think it's going to be warmer than normal within like a 3/4 sigma, just above it, if you will, is what we went with. So, everything, again, still pointing to warm, but we're looking forward to next week's forecast, if you will.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Joe. It sounds like, yeah, we got a lot of, it seems like most people are sticking with the warm themes here. So at least through the end of November. And then it seems like things maybe open up a little bit as we talk about the early mid part of December. So that could be the next interesting period to watch. All right. Anyone else have any comments or questions before we close it out? All right. Well, thank you everyone for a great discussion on the forecast and last week's verification. And we'll see everyone again next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
You too.